Welcome back to For Goodness Sake, where, as a former Mormon, I take a look at the good things that I carry with me into my new, more secular worldview. My name's Tom, and today's topic is democracy. I've always identified really strongly with the principle of democracy, as I think most Mormons do. I can think of at least two theological reasons that democracy has always been very important to me as a Mormon. The first has to do really with the church's founding. The whole story of Joseph Smith and the Restoration took place during the first few decades of the United States existing as an independent nation, and was really one of the unique places in the world where the Restoration could take place. Basically, the freedom of religion was super important for Joseph Smith to have the experience and be able to do the things he did, founding and creating a new religion. The second reason is really just the preservation of religious freedom, which allows the church to continue the way it is. Every year, when it gets close to election time, the First Presidency sends out a message to all of the wards in the church, and it's read over the pulpit, which basically tells us to engage in democracy, and that the church doesn't endorse any particular candidate, but that it encourages us to vote in accordance with the principles of the gospel, which basically means vote to preserve religious freedom or religious subsidies, but that's kind of a whole different topic. The only point I'm getting at is that democracy and the ability to participate in our government was always super important to me and remains important to me. But it's taken on a whole deeper dimension. I used to see democracy as so important because it enabled the rise of the church. Now I see democracy as one of the greatest innovations or developments in the history of humankind, and it's mainly because it's enabling kind of the opposite. It's enabling around the world a break from the authority of the church. Of course, on the one hand, the rise of democracy and religious freedom has granted religions the ability to flourish independent from government. But on the other hand, the real power of government has been separated from the power of the church. And this has just been an incredible development because it has enabled us to have secular government. Authority in the government derived only from the consent of the governed. Really cool. So why are the principles of democracy so critical? Well, I'm going to loop it back to Mormonism here because one of my favorite verses from the Doctrine and Covenants is Doctrine and Covenants 121 verse 41 that says, "No power or influence can or ought to be maintained by virtue of the priesthood. Only by persuasion, by long suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned." How does this scripture even relate to democracy? Well, I think it's the critical link, because the thrust of this scripture is if you have authority over someone, you can't just tell them what to do. You have to persuade them, be long-suffering, gentle, meek, but most importantly, you've got to make your case and persuade them to do the thing that you want them to do. In democracy, this is the key idea, in my opinion, that people in authority, instead of just saying, here's the law, you've got to do what I say, they have to make their case. They've got to persuade people. They've got to get people on board, and not just a few people, a lot of people on board so that they have the votes to sustain the thing that they're trying to do. And by forcing our leaders to make that case, we help both sides. We help the leaders to think through their empathy towards the people that they're governing, and we help the people that are being governed to be persuaded and get on board and comply with that new law or whatever. So in short, I've always loved democracy, and now that I've left Mormonism and I don't really believe in a God or the authority of God on earth, I love democracy even more because this is our ability to have our voice be heard, to participate with one another. It is how we cooperate in a democratic society, by persuading one another, by working together to make our democracy what we want it to be. So I guess I just say, get out there and vote, get out there and participate, be part of the process, and wherever possible, let's work to promote democratic principles and work against authoritarianism. And by doing that, we will be doing good for goodness sake.